One of the biggest things I've ever seen young Christians wrestle with is calling. It's one of the deepest issues. It's one of the most heart-wrenching issues. It's one of the most important issues, it seems, to the young believer, because we have such a desire to be important. We have such a desire to be a part of this story. And sometimes wanting to be a part of that story means that we have to understand or know where we're going to fit in pretty much right away. We can look at people and what they're doing, like great preachers or communicators or reformers of the faith, and we want to know if we're going to do that too. We want to know if we're going to be important. And so I'm going to talk about that today. I'm going to talk about what your calling is, because don't skip to the end, but I know what it is. I know what your calling is. I've been walking with the Lord for 5 years, and He's actually told me what everyone's calling is. So let's get into it. Like I said, there's a desire in so many young people to be a part of this massive ancient story. We read testimonies of Paul and Peter, and we look to them and compare ourselves to them, where they're at, what they've done. We relate to their stories when we read the Bible, which is a beautiful thing to do, but sometimes that can seep into other areas. The area of destiny, the area of the story. Again, where do we fit in? Where does David or Jonathan or Craig or Emily or Frank or Elijah, where do we fit in? Where do we fit in as believers? God, we want to know. And it's not a bad thing to want that. I want you to know that at the very beginning. This isn't a bad desire. It's a good desire to do something great for the kingdom. It's a good desire to want to change the world. It's a good thing, but you can't let that corrupt you. We'll get there. I'm very excited. We have a fear of not being important, the fear of missing out, the fear of not being there when something great happens, the fear of not being important. We want to sit at the head of the table. We want to be recognized when we walk into rooms. We want to change the world. And it's because we've been told to do so from the very beginning of really gathering information. Like, what do I mean? Well, we watch TV shows. We watch main characters live out stories, and we see people and character development and growth. We see guys, I always use this example of, Anakin Skywalker, probably not the greatest guy you want to be, but his son Luke is pretty good, or Indiana Jones, pretty cool guy, or Bilbo maybe, I don't know, but you get the point. Like, these main characters, like these heroes, we're taught to look up to them. We're taught to be like them. At least I was. And we're taught to want that. We're taught that that is success. But this isn't like a new thing. we read in the Bible where the disciples are asking the same question that so many of us do. Even the disciples wanted to be great. Even the disciples wanted to know what their great calling was. They only were walking with Jesus for a couple of years, and they didn't know that God had this long, thorough plan. But they wanted to know anyways. They wanted to rush the story. They wanted to be great now. They wanted to know. They wanted to be affirmed, just like us. God, what is my calling? I know you say you have plans to prosper me, not to harm me, to give me a hope and a future. I know that if I die to myself, then I'll find true life. And I know that you give life and life abundantly, but I want to know now. Tell me now, God. This is what James and John were arguing about. Are you going to let us know if we're going to sit at your right hand or at your left hand? Like, are we going to be important in heaven? So Jesus says this, on the right hand and on the left hand, they're not mine to give. Instead, it is for those to whom it has been prepared by the Father. When the disciples heard this, all 10 of them, they began to really mess around with the other two, James and John. Jesus called them over and said to them, you know that those who are regarded as rulers of the Gentiles dominate them, rule over them, have authority. That's authority right there. Authority. Goodness gracious. And their servants act like tyrants over them. But it is not so among you. On the contrary, whoever wants to become a great ruler among you, they must be your servant. And whoever wants to be first among you they will be a slave to all. For even the Son of Man did not come to be served, but to serve, and to give his life as a ransom for many. See, in this passage, Jesus describes greatness for the Christian. Jesus describes what it means to be a Christian, what it is we're called to do. Jesus describes our very purpose as Christ followers is to be a servant and a slave to all. Jesus here so clearly speaks to disciples about what it takes to be part of the story. But it can't be that simple, can it? Not to us. You see, when we Christians release the need to be seen, to be part, to be the main character, have this great, profound moment in this story, we will truly discover what our calling is. Because we'll discover who the one is calling us. The one who is calling us will discover in this process. That's what I'm trying to say. We will find the one who is calling us if we can lay our lives down as he did. Because when we partake in what he did and how he did it, he will meet us in that place. God resists the prideful, but he uplifts the humble. Jesus goes on to say, the meek shall inherit the earth, because he is that way, and he wants to give good gifts to people who can steward it. But the people who can steward it, those are the only people who act like him, who are like him. He set the example. The desire to know what our destiny is, the desire to be something, I believe, comes from the garden. The desire to be great. When Adam and Eve first tried to make a name for themselves outside of the protection and covering of God. And that's not what many people do when they're searching out their calling. They're not biting a fruit. They're not disobeying the Lord. But I want to think about it for a moment. Because when Adam and Eve wanted to take the bite, to become gods themselves, they wanted to make a name for themselves. And Jesus never did that. He never wanted to make a name for himself. I see Adam desiring position, and I see Christ rejecting it. Rejecting it. Crowds would come and he said, eat of my flesh, take of my body. He knew what he was doing. And all the people left, like, oh my gosh, this is so weird. It's so strange. When he would heal people, he would say, don't tell anyone. Don't see it. He rejected it. He didn't want it. He didn't want the attention. But Adam did. Eve desired it. So I do paint the picture, and I paint it confidently with the means to communicate. I believe desire for position and power is of the devil, because it is the devil who first offered it, not God. The strive to be seen and mean something is rooted in the ancient choice to depart from submission from the Lord. That is why when Jesus preaches the verse to be a servant to all, to be a slave to every other man around you, is offensive to our flesh, to our dead man. Offensive. We as Christians have a pressure on our shoulder, an unnecessary pressure, a pressure to understand why, and a pressure to understand how, a pressure to know when and where, when we worry about our calling. This pressure is not ours to bear, it is Christ's. He is the one with all knowledge and understanding. He is the one with the plan. He is the one whose yoke is easy and burden is light. And when you try to understand your calling and your destiny, you are now rushing the process. And that yoke that you're supposed to carry with Christ, a yoke is that wood thing that you put on the back of ox, and they carry things, they carry the cart, they pull. It's like this weight that's on an ox's back. Like when you try to do that yourself, you then carry it yourself. And that's why your life may be so hard. That might be why you're so stressed all the time. You have two types of people, and they both want to be preachers. One is walking in pace with Christ, the other is not. Here are the outcomes. The one who's walking with Christ is, oh man, I'm working at Home Depot and this is hard and all I want to do is preach, but I know that God is good. I know that his pace and his timing is the best. So for whatever reason, I'm going to trust the Lord. I'm going to trust that he has me here for a purpose. And that person goes on, works at Home Depot for 7 years, and he understands people. He gets a better understanding of the blue collar people that he wants to work with and work for as a preacher. He works with the people that he will then soon to really love and pour into. He gets to know them because he worked in their field. And then he's one of the best communicators to hardworking people because he worked in the field for 7 years. The other guy's impatient. He bounces job to job to job to job because he wants to be a preacher. He wants to preach so bad, but he's not talking and he's just working. And he has this weird job here and this job gets hard and he doesn't want to do it. And so he actually never learns, and he never learns how to love people. And he delays what the Lord wanted to do because he was so impatient. Because he didn't realize God was preparing him to be a preacher in the workforce because he was learning how to love people who needed the preaching in the first place. You see, we have to stay in step with Christ, and we have to let him be the one with the knowledge and understanding of our calling. Let it go. Give your request to the Lord, because you might want to be a preacher, but God says, no, you need to be a teacher. No, you actually lean more on the side of the prophetic. No, I want you to go around and actually pray for people's healing, not teach the Bible. Like, we don't know. There's so many parts in the Christian body that you gotta just allow God to work you in. Don't try to figure it out yourself. When a Christian lays down the need to know our great destiny, we start walking in it. Because our destiny as believers is that very thing. Your calling is to die and let Christ be the one who knows. Let Christ be the one to be the main character of the story. Matthew 16:24. Then Jesus said to his disciples, if anyone wants to follow me, let him deny himself. Lord, I trust you. Let him take up his cross and follow me. Mark 8:34. Calling to the crowd along with the disciples, he said to them, if anyone wants to follow after me, let them deny themselves. Again, pick up their cross and follow me. Galatians 2:20. I've been crucified, Paul's saying, I've been crucified with Christ. I no longer live, but Christ in me. A man who says that no longer worries about his destiny because it's not him living anymore. It's not his destiny, it's what he wants. It's what he wants. Christ is living in me. It's the destiny that Christ wants, not what I want. The life I now live in the body, I live by faith in the Son of God, who loved me and gave himself for me. My hair changed. Magic, not editing. Roommates came in. So, the closer you walk with Christ, the closer you get to the light. So the more you see, and the more you'll get on your knees. And this is holy. So what does this mean? Hello. As we read these Bible verses, we realize the Christian's call is to die. The Christian's call in this life, in this beautiful, fantastic life, is to lay it down. And when we lay it down, the burden is easy and the yoke is light. When we lay it down, we find true life, because it is not we who live, but Christ through us. So our calling will then flow in its right time. We will be in pace, at the pace of grace, and run this race with endurance until the end. Because we are no longer the main character. A man named Saint Augustine, that's his first name, Saint, and his last name Augustine. I'm kidding, but he's a church father. His name's Augustine. From Sermon 96 on the words of the Gospel of Matthew, he quotes, if you seek a good life, then strive for this, to cling to God with all your heart, to lift up your soul to him, and to live the cross, to live the cross, to lay it down, to cling to him. Can you see, as a believer, our victory is clinging to him, is dying to ourselves and clinging to the cross. saying, Christ, the cross is all I need. When we do this as believers, we fulfill something so beautiful as children of God, a full trust and vulnerability that we need to survive in this Christian walk, in this horrible world. It is the place of sanctification, is laying ourselves down. The place of being made like Christ. I was in Sacramento and I was about to preach to 600 people. And during this time of my life, I was feeling the weight of my sin like no other. I was realizing a lot of flaws about myself. I was realizing how messed up I was as a Christian. I was realizing how weak I was. And right before I preached, I was like, God, should I even be able to preach? Should I even be able to do this? Because I know how much I suck. I was in my feelings, man. And I got on the floor and I started to cry on my hands and knees saying, Christ, I'm a weak man. I need help. I need help. And I felt peace just flood my body as my tears are making the cement black because of how much I was crying. I felt like the Lord said to me, stay in this place. Stay here because this is good. When we remain desperate for Christ, it is a good thing. Because we're not desperate for anything else. It is a safe place. It is a good place. Dependency on the cross is safe and it is good. It is the greatest opportunity for us as believers here on earth. The greatest opportunity to even touch greatness is relying on His. That is the sign of greatness. That is your calling. By embracing weakness, we can taste true greatness. I have seen my calling, and it is to lean on Him with my entire being, trusting, not in myself, but only in Him. And I now am free. I am free of the need to be seen. I am free of the need of needing anything to make my mark, to be seen, to be placed in a high position. I am dead. Now I am truly alive. His yoke is easy and His burden is light. With this revelation, my prayers have been quieter. I pray quieter. I speak less when I talk to Him. I think more. I ponder more. I think of the cross more than my problems now in prayer. I ponder His goodness and not. I dare not to protest my own. I used to sit in prayer and tell God, I love you. God, you are my King. You're everything, God. I love you. I'll never leave you. I would say those things, and those are good. Jesus, I'll never forsake you. When times would go hard, when spiritual warfare was pressing, I would say that, Jesus, I trust you with my entire fiber, with my entire being. I believe you. I love you. But now I come to Him with His goodness and greatness. I approach His throne, not with my assurity in myself, but with His assurity in me. His greatness. You're like a tree. No, you're like a leaf on a tree. You're part of a greater body. Your job is to take in the sun. Your job is to embrace the light, which is Christ. Not just for yourself, for the embedment, for the betterment. What away the embedment? For the betterment of the body. When we reject the need to be part of the story, we embrace the fact. We embrace the fact that it's good to even be here. Does that make sense? Because of course we're part of the story, but when I say part, I put it in italics. I underline it so you know, because I'm talking about to be a part, to be the guy, to be the woman. When we let that go and be thankful that we're even here. When we embrace Christ's goodness and embrace the beauty of just being alive. of this world, that is when we are set free. That is when we become really Christians. And that's when God can work. I was talking to you earlier about how God will give good things to those who are like him, because if we're like him, he can trust us with those good things, because doing it his way is the only way, because it would crush us any other way. Philippians 2, it says, Christ made himself of no reputation. He humbled himself, becoming obedient even to the point of death, even to the cross. And for this reason, God highly exalted him and gave him a name above every other name. And if God will make himself of no reputation, he there shows us our calling. For we are to be, as Christians, Christ-like ones, who do not shy away from humility, from needing not to be the main character. We embrace it, accept it with gratitude. I said in my sermon notes, I'm not going to read them all. If you want my notes, if you want to see everything that I wrote, you can go subscribe to my Instagram. I have this all there for you, but I'll give you a piece. Our purpose in creation was not to design the garden, but to steward it. So let's live good and quiet lives filled with excellence and consistency. And if the Lord wants to exalt us in our stewardship of his creation, he will do so. He'll bring us into that position. Again, if you want more on that, you can go and subscribe for $4.99. Very opposite to everything that we've ever been told, huh? Very contrary to everything that has been shoved down our throats since we have walked on this beautiful earth that we call home. But this is the kingdom way, because the meek inherit the earth, because the meek are like Christ, as I said before. Your calling is to be underneath the fold of his wing, to serve humbly and patiently as you await his arrival. We are meant to be good, loving God and others. We are called to make disciples and be last at the table. There I saved you like 7 years of pain and confusion about what you're supposed to do as a Christian. God has used many people before you, and he'll use many after you. And if you can just choose to be a part of the story, not part of the story, you will step in the proper way of a Christian. The way of the cross, the way of the Lamb. And you will finish well, because you ran well the entire time. You ran humbly. You ran patiently. You ran awaiting his approval, his acceptance, not seeking it out for yourself. Rejecting the temptation of Adam and Eve, rejecting the temptation of the devil to be someone. You see, the devil, Adam and Eve, many men and women before us, there's one thing they can never get over, that God was in his proper position, and so are we. And so if you can accept that, you accept your calling. And that is a very good thing. Amen.